Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's session. Today we have Mr. Madhusudan Shekhar. He's customer CTO at Google, works with large customers of Google to help them gain strategic competitive advantage with technology. Thank you so much for taking up the time
Thank you,
to
Saurabh.
help us record this session, which will help our students, learners, taking up this course on emerging technologies for business and society. So, Madhu is what you preferred. So,
Yes,
I will
thank you.
address you as Madhu throughout this conversation. My name is Saurabh Bajaj. I am Director for Center for Digital Learning at Flame University, and you will have access to this content as part of course on Swim platform. So, Madhu, let me start this conversation. I think before this session itself, we have had multiple conversations, very interesting conversations. So, thank you for that time. Uh, for interest of our students and for their understanding, we know that there are a lot of these emerging disruptive technologies which are around us. We keep hearing about them. One thing we would really love to understand is how do we identify these disruptive or emerging technologies, whatever terminology we use. What is the secret sauce behind it? As you know, because you help large organizations, large customers gain competitive advantage with technologies. How do you identify these technologies?
Yeah, Saurabh, first of all, thanks for giving us the opportunity from, and then coming into this campus was fantastic. Um, so first, I'm not necessarily, contextualizing it differently, but I, I don't necessarily think of things as disruptive technologies because
Sure.
the term disruptive generally means something goes away
Right.
or something vanishes. And if you look at it over a time and period, things don't just vanish. For example, I work in IT, and in IT, people say, "Hey, a lot of things are disruptive." People still use COBOL and Fortran, and
Right.
there's quite a bit of it sitting around, and they will be there for a long time. So it's not as disruptive that we think of in many things, right? UPI is very popular, and we do digital payments, but that doesn't mean cash has gone away. It
Got
is
it.
not necessarily removed cash
Right.
from society, right? So the way I look at technology is that I slightly use a modified term. I use the term exponential change. Technologies that offer an exponential change, right? And the term exponential change is that what happens is from the time a piece of technology starts becoming accessible to consumers, and very specifically I use the word consumer. What happens is there is a very rapid adoption or absorption of this technology in society, right? And we have seen this across a number of changes. It's not new. It's not something that's happening recently.
Sure.
To me, at least the way of whatever limited reading I have done, electricity has been a technology of exponential change.
Sure.
There was a period of time that electricity was seen. We were doing windmills and other things to move water and build like to do textile industry, etc. And then electricity came in a span of like 30, 40 years. We did whatever we want, wherever we wanted. We set up factories, and the whole thing changed.
I
We
was
started
tempted
like
to use the term disruptive here. It disrupted the industry, but I will stay away from that. Exponential change technology.
Lovely.
Right.
So,
Please.
so that happened with electricity. So we can see that. I mean, we stopped pouring oil into lamps on street sides
Right.
and stuff
Right.
like that. So that happened, and within the IT industry and technology industry I work in the internet and the personal computing era,
Right.
the personal computing era from pretty much the 80s onwards was exponential change.
Right.
The internet was exponential, though the internet was actually created by ARPANET and
Right.
things like that way long ago. At the point where it hit consumer markets, which was like late 80s, early 90s, you can see the absorption rate was very high. And actually, if you look at if you read any of the books about the background of Jeff Bezos, you will actually see him make the statement that in D.E. Shaw, he actually saw 1,000+% growth rate. Wow. On the way in which people were using the internet. The growth of internet was about 1,000% year on year, and that's the reason he felt that e-commerce is going to be tremendously important, right? Lovely. So that's was exponential change. And if you look at mobility, there was this day. There is this beautiful picture you will see in a few places where there's a picture of the Pope being selected at the Vatican Square, and there's a picture that you'll see in a lot of presentations where you'll see like people are just standing there waiting for the white smoke to come out, and then another year there's everybody with a digital phone clicking that. Right? The entire Vatican Square has mobile phones clicking that scene, right? So it's like, in a matter of just few years between 2005 and 2006 and 2009, almost a good part of the developed world started having a mobile phone. right? A smartphone to specifically
To that
that,
extent,
right? So these are again exponential change technology. Now, what we have seen is we have seen each of these evolve to a point. Now we believe, or I believe right now, definitely, which I'm sure all of us see again. Uh, Artificial intelligence, which has been evolving since the 1970s, has now hit the consumer side.
Right.
Right now, with generative AI and tooling around generative AI, it is now possible for us to see that very uh, simple things that are things that we used to take a lot of effort to do,
Right.
especially on the creative side or on the where there is a certain set of startup activity. Like, for example, if you ask me to write an essay, it takes me a lot of time to imagine what should I write. Right,
Writer's
the
block.
blank screen happens, right? And
Right.
then today it's like, hey, this is what I want to do about, and then you are given a jolt of advantage to get started and moving on this subject a lot faster. And that's a phenomenal improvement in productivity that you see around what everybody does.
Right.
So that's how I see this now. But if you think of each of these, none of these, neither the internet, nor AI, nor mobility, like if you think of smartphones, that's very easy. But if you think of the evolution of how we got there,
Right.
it has taken decades to get to that
Get
point,
there,
right?
of
Same
course.
thing with the internet, same thing with AI, same thing with any of the, like the electricity in late 19th century, something. But remember, it started with Michael Faraday in like 18th century. Right, 17th or 18th century, something like that. That's 200 years plus.
Right.
So there is a lot that occurs iteratively over time, and then a whole bunch of things come together, and then it hits the consumer. And when it does hit the consumer, because of a lot of the efficiencies that offers with all these foundation technologies around, you see that massive absorption velocity. That is the exponential change that we observe. So it's not like I see this as, hey, this happens overnight. It's not happening overnight. It's happening over decades of effort, research, math, physics, etc. that actually gets you there.
No, interesting. Very interesting, Madhu, you say that. You mentioned about ARPANET, right? We know that internet happened because Department of Defense in the US was working on it
Yes.
for some time. And now we see AI. I'm not sure if Defense Department was involved or someone else was involved. So what drives these, adoption of tech development, first of all, and then adoption of these technologies? Given your experience working with large organizations in the past and even now, either from a customer or as your employer side, uh, can you share some examples with our learners, where organizations keep investing in certain, I don't know, do they invest in these technologies, or is it still happening in the labs, or is it someone sponsored by government? So who's backing these technologies? Are there any examples you can help us understand this a little better?
Sure. So I'll start with something that a lot of us in India can relate to a lot easily.
Sure.
Right. UPI.
Interesting.
It is. If you look at UPI, it was an exponential change technology.
Interesting.
Right. I think 2014 or 15 is basically somewhere in that window it was launched.
Right.
It did not. The absorption was slow. It's progressing.
Right.
It was moving fast, but it is not as fast as what we would think. Then
Like
we
you
had
call it
one
exponential.
catalyst. The first catalyst occurred with demonetization.
Right.
The second catalyst, completely uncontrollable, was COVID.
Right.
And then it just took off. We never looked back.
Of course.
Right. Now, is it possible for a private organization to invest and build on UPI? It is fairly hard because the underlying inertia you have to build across to do this is hard.
Understood.
Because you don't see the level one ROI. It's not like, hey, I put this money, I'm going to get this back.
Right.
Like in 3 quarters or 2 quarters or 6 quarters, which is generally how most businesses think of.
Quarter to quarter living.
Even
or
in spite of a
year-to-year.
lot of organizations saying, hey, we do long-term thinking, that long-term thinking is generally like a few years. Right?
Right.
And it has to be benefit to them also.
Understood. Of course.
Right? It's not benefit just to society. Yes, now at Google we do a lot of investment on benefit to society, etc. But something like UPI is a lot harder to bridge over. So that's where whenever you think of something like that, internet would be another example, right? As you said, we think of a particular need. We say we solve a level 1 problem and then a level 2 problem, and then you open it up. GPS was a phenomenal such example.
Understood.
It was designed for the US military to have a certain requirement. And there was an air accident, and President Bill Clinton basically said, we have this fantastic technology, we never gave it to anybody, we should. And he opened it up. Yes, with a lower resolution than what the military has,
Right.
but that is way better to do it. Now, if you think of can somebody do this, the opportunity for a private enterprise to do that is lower.
Limited. Understood.
It's not that it's impossible to do. It's just that it doesn't show up on our day-to-day meetings and conversations that
Right.
easily.
Right.
Right. It's not a very natural fit.
No, fair point.
But it does. Governments can do this.
Understood.
As society, we should do this, and that's an example of what happens with UPI. Now, once you see the foundation technologies come
Right.
together, right? So in the case of AI, it again happened. I wouldn't say it was just the government, but you will see a lot of pieces in the puzzle started falling together, right?
Sure.
The evolution of ImageNet, which was effectively a different way of computing,
Right.
using NVIDIA's parallel computing architectures, GPU-based architecture to say, hey, we can do this and solve for it. The math existed, but
Right.
having to implement it and show it and it actually succeeds was interesting. And a lot of universities and colleges naturally contribute. The research arm of that, right, contributes to this, and you will see this move forward. So that's the part where I would say is the foundation technologies does require government, universities, research organizations to come in. I don't see it in there. But once that happens, I believe enterprises do take it very, very fast.
Application adoption.
And yes, application adoption. So whether these are large organizations like Carrefour or a Bharati in India or a HDFC in India, right? Or if you look at organizations, and there are young digital innovators, startups that take advantage of the fact, like the larger organizations can't move that fast.
Sure.
So what happens is these exponential technologies, at a particular point in the inception, what happens is you find out that if I start on this today, right, your ability to go faster than others is much better. So in Amazon, think about it, Amazon 1998, right?
Right.
I want to sell books
Right.
online,
Right.
and everybody's thinking, what's the point?
Right. Fair point.
Right? But you have that deep insight that says, I can do this better. I mean, when I look at today, a Swiggy or a Zomato in India, it's not like we could not get food delivery before. We always used to, if you had a phone, you could call a restaurant and say, hey, come over.
Right.
Right? And the nearby shop would deliver it to you. So it was available. Discoverability was a challenge, but definitely you would get food delivery. Pizzas have been delivered for decades. Like Domino's used to do that, Pizza Hut used to do that. They've always been doing delivery. It's not new.
Right.
So, but what these companies were able to do is take advantage of mobile phone, GPS, smart user interfaces, recommendation engines, improve your discoverability, etc., to now make it very efficient for you to get that experience packaged as a whole. Is it disruptive? No. But is it exponential change? I would say it definitely is. Because if you ask your students today where food comes from, they probably are going to say Swiggy, Zomato.
Lovely.
Rather than your canteen.
Fair point.
Right?
Fair point.
So it changes our influence. And very simple. I mean, to me, another great, or something that I really relate to is the remote control on TV. You never go back.
Sure.
There are 2 channels.
Right.
You would get up and change the channel.
Right.
And then we had 100 channels.
Correct.
And we never went up. Right?
No, fair point.
So that UX part, it is not possible for you to have 100 channels on the TV if you're going to get up and change every time.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
So the fact that the remote control makes it possible allows you to expand the number of channels on TV, so that exponential change occurs as a result of that.
I'm certainly getting the hang of the term you use, exponential change, because I think you rightly pointed. If you look at the technologies, my understanding again, if I just play it back, while there has been some nudge and push from some sponsoring body, it could be government, it could be university, or it could be Defense Department in the US, or space research organizations across the world. Some, like as we know, that microwave was probably pioneered because they wanted to heat up stuff when they are without using fire, right? So that's how it started. So maybe they would have nudged one portion, but the change can be exponential when it has been adopted and applied by consumers, large enterprises in different spheres of their life. So who would
just
have
to add, like generally consumers,
will come
the
at the
early
end-
innovators pick up first a lot more in many cases.
Sure.
Even electricity, if you think of, got put into many people's homes before offices.
Oh, interesting.
Right? So you had rich people who said, hey, I need electricity in my house, right?
Lovely.
So So you see that consumer adoption does exist. That validates to a business. I don't know. The fundamental question in any business first is, who uses it?
Right.
Who wants it?
Yeah. That's how businesses will think, right?
First
I will
thing.
create it
Correct.
only if
And
there is a
that-
buyer.
Correct. And that means you must establish the early innovator absorption must
Understood.
exist. That's where you put it. There are in some cases, like certain classes of technologies or capabilities that only a business can absorb.
Understood.
Like, for example, collaboration.
Or in
things
3D
like that.
printing.
3D printing. Like, it's a personal 3D printing is a nice hobby.
Sure.
But yes, but factories and 3D printing in the enterprises are something that's very important. That's something they would find more value and relevance to. So there's a lot of technologies that go the other way.
Sure.
But yeah.
Very interesting. No, this has been very interesting. So thank you so much for sharing that perspective and helping me align more with the exponential change technology concept rather than just calling it disruptive, because changes can happen at an exponential rate. But first, it has to be, as you rightly mentioned, it doesn't happen overnight. It takes multiple years, and there are certainly early adopters or innovators,
Yes.
which drive this particular change. Very interesting. So, are there any particular examples of apart from governments, based on, I understand the privileged conversation you have with your clients, so we don't have to name them or their industry or their geography. Again, up to you. How would you be comfortable sharing some examples of where some of these technologies are currently being experimented, which we don't hear much often? Are there any examples you would like to share with us?
Sure. Naturally, I'll talk about what's in public domain. So,
Sure.
Apollo Hospitals, and this is an area that I'm very, very interested in. Apollo Hospitals is a great example. Today, they want to use AI to have and help doctors, right, accelerate diagnosis, understand course of treatment, assist through course of treatment to their patients.
Lovely.
Doctors, in their fair right, are very, very good in what they do, etc.
Right.
But the complexity of, as things improve, the more we discover about diseases and more we discover treatment protocols, there's a lot happening everywhere.
Right.
Now, it is fairly hard for a doctor to keep pace, and it is a horrendous energy to keep pace. Now,
Right.
Therefore, giving them the tools and mechanics and systems, so that's something that they've developed called Ask Apollo, which is also available in some of their apps as a nice, simple guidance system. But much more importantly, for the doctors, as part of their diagnostic process, what happens is they work with the patient. They're like, this is what I observe, this is what I see, this is what I believe it is. Now, is there other indications I should look for? What can happen? So AI accelerates their ability to move,
enhances
their ability to do things
Understood.
faster, better, etc.
Understood.
Which means your ability to get to a protocol of treatment is much faster. You can make the right recommendations to a patient and identify how they have to progress forward much, much better, right? I mean, this is something that, from a health and healthcare standpoint, given our scale in our country, given the ratio of doctors to patients, etc., it becomes a very powerful tool, enabling mechanism for this to come through. And again, remember, this is, at Google, we have this thing called MedLLM, which is certified AI capability for medical care, for medical science, right?
Understood.
And that is something that you can use for this. Now, you will see a lot of this, like if you look at another example would be in the creative space, where today creative professionals use this for digital marketing, content creation, video creation, image generation. So nowadays, even when I create slides, most of the images that I do are just generated.
Oh, interesting.
I don't have to go to Google Photos and copy something. It just plagiarizes somebody's content. You just generate the content based on the context you are in. So you don't have to really do this. And it's very powerful in terms of what you can achieve with it.
And this is possible because what you mentioned earlier also, the ecosystem existed, is now mature enough to make it happen.
Yes. So now, one of the things that happens is we have to look at it as, the ecosystem has to exist. All that content has to exist. See, today, if we think of generative AI, it is not possible for generative AI to exist without all the data. Like, think about it. There was an internet.
Right.
The internet enabled everybody to start publishing somewhere in the late 2000s. The ability of bidirectional internet occurred.
Right.
So we started putting content out there.
Right.
So people started blogging. People started posting photos. People started posting videos.
News media started putting a lot of news in
a lot of public content got enabled. And once news started coming in, so what happens? All of this public content and data makes it possible for me to create a higher quality next word predictor.
Fair
Right?
point.
It enables you to have a better high quality conversation.
Right.
It enables you to generate better images,
Right.
so on and so forth. Now, is it possible to build a generative AI agent without any of this happening in the past? Possibly, but much, much slower. It would not have happened now. It would have happened maybe even much more into the future.
Understood.
But these foundation technologies had to exist for that to exist today. But
point.
AI, as neural networks, was created in 1970.
Right. It didn't happen just few years
Neural
back.
networks existed.
Interesting.
Right? 1970, Jeffrey Hinton and et al. Basically developed the paper on that.
Lovely.
It has taken.
Is it the teachable machines concept? No, it's different.
It's different. Yeah,
Understood.
but the idea is that what Jeffrey Hinton did was he took the idea of how the brain works and said that's how I'm going to map that to a neural network.
Of course. Right.
So the idea of a neural network and what went from there, the ImageNet was actually built on the same concept, right?
Understood.
Like I can do parallel programming to achieve the same thing. With the limited compute capacity, that's what we could do on that day.
On that day.
Now, you build on all these building blocks. Now, today, we are at a point where we can do this much better.